Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Friends. This is Joe Cunningham. Joining me tonight is Bill McMorris of the Washington Free Beacon. Say hello, Bill. And he muted himself.
I was clicked out. I'm sorry.
Also joining us from the Decision Desk HQ, Jeff Blehar.
What's up, my friends?
And joining us from Twitter is Neal Dewing. Hello, Neal.
How are we doing?
I'm not sure why the Wicked Witch of the West just started cackling, but I'm very uncomfortable at it.
I know. Neal knows why I'm laughing.
So, first of all, let's get started right now. In case anybody was unaware, back in 2014, the Democrats accused the Republicans of bringing us a war on women, and it was something that was scoffed at by the Republican Party. And then 4 years later, the Donald Trump campaign actually declared that war. And so we've had numerous incidents of Donald Trump being an absolute jackass toward women, and he has now decided that Michelle Fields of Breitbart was actually approaching him with a bomb in the shape of a pin because she is also Agent 007 and tried to kill him. And that's exactly why Corey Lewandowski took her down. He is an American hero. Talking a little bit more about this British spy and the damage she could have wrought to 2016, let's go to Bill McMorris first.
I actually have a contrarian opinion here, and that is that every time a journalist enters a press scrum, they're likely to get pushed, normally by cameramen and not stagehands for candidates. And I think you should grow up, take your medicine. Yes, someone grabbed you. It's not the end of the world. And pressing charges and everybody just defining assault and battery down, I think, is a shameful thing. Now, do I think the Trump campaign handled it well? Did they have to accuse her of being a liar and saying that he had never seen her before? No, of course not. That was stupid. But they have devised the rather genius tactic of deny, 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 change your position, and eventually you can change the subject and you'll get away with it. So, of course, the media has allowed them to use this playbook, and it's been highly effective. This is the one case where it blew up in their faces, albeit in a very minor manner. The fact that that dominated an entire day of the news cycle last week and continues to be some of the first questions asked at town halls is damning. It's damning. There is nothing the media likes more than a Trump story and navel-gazing, self-importance of journalists, and we have both elements here, and I think we should all be ashamed of ourselves for making that the first topic we're talking about today. The day this dominated the news cycle last week, ISIS basically repelled the sack on Mosul. So maybe we should get our priorities straight and talk about something other than a woman being moved 4 steps backward.
I hadn't heard that about ISIS.
Bill, let's.
Oh, you
thank
hadn't?
You very
That's
much.
weird.
Thank you very much for your opinions, Bill, no matter how wrong they are, considering that this is more of a gossip show than it is actual news and talk. Going to Jeff. Now, Jeff, today, a breaking development, Pat Robertson has said that Michelle Fields did approach him like she was going to try to take Trump out. How do you feel about the 700 Club and their stance on this scandal?
Well, I think it's a perfectly reasonable position to take. You know, I imagine there were some secret meetings at the Breitbart editorial board, and we came up with Operation Valkyrie, all right, as opposed to Valkyrie, where the idea was used to have Michelle Fields act as a sort of a false flag bomber with a knife pen or a bomb pen, and then they would have plausible deniability because it would have come from a friendly source. No, actually, kidding aside, I'm split two ways. I, of course, like all rational, red-blooded Americans, loathe Trump, and so it was very easy for me to seize upon this and, you know, work myself into high dudgeon because, you know, the way that Trump's people handled it particularly was offensive. If this had happened And it had just been a question of Corey Lewandowski saying, "Oh man, hey, listen, I'm sorry, I got a little bit worked up." I think it's fair to say that you couldn't make much of it. But the lying, the refusal to admit any sort of error, that's the sort of thing that really got me into my classic Trumpian, anti-Trump high dudgeon. But Bill's right. Bill is actually right about this. This is not a big deal. And I think that at the end of the day, it's the kind of issue that loses the media's respect for Trump, but the media didn't have any respect for Trump to begin with. So all it does is merely harden and solidify a position that already existed. But Trump's voters and maybe even the average Joe look at this and they don't care. They probably think Trump sounds like pretty stupid when he's like, "Whoa, I don't know what she had in her hand. Maybe she was trying to kill me." That part is ridiculous. But the part where they look at it and they say, like, "Come on, what's the big deal here? Somebody just got a little bit of a yank. Stop making, this into, the crucifixion of, Jesus Christ." I think that's a good point, and it doesn't really do us any good to continue to fixate on it.
Or ISIS's crucifixion of a Catholic priest last week, which also happened the day that we focused on Michelle Fields getting yanked.
Yeah, but you know what, Bill, I got to say, the problem I have with drawing a direct comparison to that is that they aren't equivalent news stories. You can't say, hey, you need to compare, you need to worry about what's going on in Syria, or, hey, well, what about all these some important death in Chicago, or something like that. Political news is always going to be falling into its own box. It's going to be treated, as a sort of a distinct category. So, yeah,
and maybe that's why the Never Trump crowd, maybe that's why the Never Trump crowd and the vetting of Trump has not produced any sort of results, because
I would strongly disagree.
We sit there and we run again and again Republican operatives running a general election campaign strategy basically designed to defeat Republicans. But they're running it during a primary. They go, "Oh, the war on women narrative really helped defeat Mitt Romney, so maybe we can use it in our own primary to really defeat Trump." And I think that's why nothing has stopped him from gaining steam, is we sit there and, we got Murphy going, "Hey, where's that Thai maid?" And we got everyone basically advancing. You have the pro-life movement rending its garments because Trump said something pro-life. It's made people insane and basically repudiate their own principles while accusing Trump of lacking all principle. And it's been really disappointing to say.
First of all, I'm going to let Neal speak for a second here, but I got to ask you one question first. First of all, I completely disagree with that. I think that the Never Trump movement hasn't exactly, killed him stone dead, but they have halted his momentum. There's been no rallying around the front runner the way there has always been in previous elections. Prior to this, you have to go back as far as maybe Reagan and Ford in '76. So I think you're very wrong about that. Second of all, I don't understand what you mean when you say, like, people are selling out this whole, Trump said something pro-life and people are in high dudgeon about it. Are you referring to Trump's ridiculous abortion comments? And if you are, maybe we'll come back to it, because we've talked too long and poor Neal's probably tired of listening to us.
Okay, so you want an actual response.
No, I don't actually care.
Yes, we've actually seen this entire thing. Foreign policy hawks have for years complained that NATO allies do not spend enough money on their military and force America to, cough up ever more necessary and scarce taxpayer dollars to defend the lot of them. That's been a common GOP vetch about our allies not defending themselves, not preparing adequately. When Trump says it, all of a sudden we're going to alienate our allies and everything. That sort of statement, from the Never Trump movement. I'm sure if we went back, we would see, columns from some of these guys back in 2006 bitching about how not enough coalition forces are contributing in Afghanistan or Iraq. This has been a talking point for decades from American conservatives, and yet the second Trump says them, we all, put our panties in a bunch and say, like, this is the worst thing that's ever happened. It's happened time and again with issue over issue. Last week, when Trump said that NATO allies are going to have to cough up some more money if they want America to defend them, and basically he was accused of, I think I guess Max Boot was one of the most famous ones, of trying to run a protection racket. And, you know, that's a guy who for years has said and called on Europe and NATO members to spend more money on their defense and contribute more to the wars that we enter. So, I mean, I don't know, Neal.
I think part of the problem here is that nobody really trusts that Trump means what he says when he makes these statements. They don't believe he's thought about it for longer than 5 minutes, and so while he may be saying sort of the right thing in terms of NATO, which is, you know, anytime we're talking about alliances and foreign relations, we need to remember that nations act out of their interest and not out of their sympathies. So it's this thing is that Trump is so bad at reassuring people that he's not just some belly aching old man that you could find, you know, on any email chain across the United States. It's like, you know, I'll tell you what you want to do. I'll tell you what you got to do right now. That kind of thing. That kind of mentality. It's like, that's not the sort of person that you really want to trust with, you know, nuclear weapons and that sort of. So there are some concerns about Trump as a messenger, and as a man who would be given the keys to power here that are very legitimate. As to his abortion comments, he lacks charity, and that's an essential component here. If you were to criminalize abortion, if you were to make abortion illegal, yes, there would have to be some sort of disincentivizing mechanism in place. Should it be against the woman? I don't think so. I do think doctors who perform the abortions would need to be, you know, punished rather severely. But there should be, instead of, you know, talking about sending women who get abortions to jail, which won't help them.
He didn't say that. He said
no. I know, I know. He could have been talking about anything, but because it's Trump, he's not one to make these nuanced, charitable arguments that you absolutely need to make. When you're talking about abortion, you have to be somewhat sensitive. It's just it's a fraught issue at the best of times. Donald Trump is the exact wrong man to talk about what to do if abortion is illegal. So Trump as a messenger is just abysmal. But
on that note, Neal, and kind of what I'm getting, at least from Bill, and maybe to a lesser extent you here, is that we're very much caught up in shooting the messenger, with the counter to that being that the messenger is very new to the message and doesn't quite have the nuances of that message down. The question becomes for conservatives who use the hashtag #NeverTrump, will there ever be a moment when Donald Trump is considered trustworthy on these issues that he either botched or flip-flopped on?
No. Never.
No. Yeah, round the panel, no.
Well, why not?
But see, this is what sucks about watching our side repudiate its own positions, is because we've effectively given ammunition to the left. March for Life actually said, you know, we should never punish a woman who has, quote, chosen abortion. Like, they're even using the language of the left here. And that gives credence, aid, and comfort to the enemy. And I just don't believe in it. I mean,
they wouldn't have to say that if Trump wasn't getting out ahead of it. He comes out here and he just barges in and makes this kind of, you know, idiot statement without any kind of sensitivity or charity or consideration that it is a difficult situation a lot of these women find them in. Now, it's true, there are some women who use abortion as birth control, and it's disgusting and terrible, and they'll suffer for it. They do suffer for it. That's the untold story, and I think you would agree with me, Bill, that a lot of women who have chosen abortion, not been pressured into it, come to regret it later. And so you're never going to draw those people back to the right side of morality by threatening them. Is my standpoint.
We got Gaddafi on the right side of morality by bombing the shit out of Iraq. So maybe we can do it. No, I mean what I'm talking about, the lasting damage, is so many of these quotes and these sound bites that we're using against Trump will eventually be used against us. And I especially when it comes to the abortion issue. I mean, when Mike Murphy and Jeb Bush and Chris Christie went after Marco Rubio for being too pro-life, you just knew that if he was the nominee, that was going to end up in Hillary Clinton ads. Too extreme for Jeb Bush. Too extreme for Chris Christie. Wrong for you.
That's a valid point.
And I want to see Trump defeated in the primary, and I don't see them running a primary campaign against him. I see them running a general election campaign, small potatoes, try to get the war on women hashtag going again strategy. And it's not working because our audience is not receptive to that. They don't like being called racists and homophobes and anti-women and everything like that. And they sure as hell aren't going to like it and respond to it just because it's directed at Donald Trump. So I see it as being ineffectual.
All right. Now, on the subject of primary versus general election, we do have coming up Wisconsin, and right now all the polls are showing that Ted Cruz has a big advantage in Wisconsin. Scott Walker came out and endorsed Ted Cruz and has been making calls, or at least his voice is being used in robocalls on Cruz's behalf. How big, and Jeff, this will go to you since you're with the decision desk, how important would it be for Ted Cruz to not only win in Wisconsin but win big there?
It's the entire game. Cruz has to win Wisconsin. If Cruz doesn't win Wisconsin, not only is it numerically a huge problem for the Stop Trump forces, it's going to be a narrative disaster, especially now that the expectations have been set the way they are. Not only does Scott Walker endorse Cruz, the entirety of Wisconsin talk radio, which is actually a very powerful force within the state, a very unifying force within the state, driven primarily by Charlie Sykes, they've all gotten behind Cruz too. And they're very anti-Trump, not like a lot of other states where they think, well, hey, the viewers the listeners want to hear pro-Trump stuff. No, in Wisconsin they're not. It's probably the reason for that is because in Wisconsin conservatives are very happy with their governor for the most part, and they're very satisfied with what's been achieved under Scott Walker's administration for the past 7 years. So you've got a situation where Cruz has to win, and if he does win, the current numbers he's pulling, I think that he's going to win almost every delegate in the state, if not most of them. And if he does that, it's basically curtains. It's curtains for Trump. I mean, absent some sort of exogenous factor, a scandal, a meteor strike, someone gets hit by a bus, that kind of a thing. Just saying, assuming the trends continue on the way they are, what will happen next is you're going to have 2 weeks between Wisconsin and the next primary, at which point Trump will win New York and New Jersey. He's going to do great there. It's his home area. He'll kill it there. But he's not going to have enough gas left to win the remaining states. He's not going to get any of the unbound delegates in places like Pennsylvania, Colorado, North Dakota, any of the territories. He's not going to make it. But it all depends upon what happens in Wisconsin. So, yes, this is a very big deal. Right now, things are looking I'm not even cautiously optimistic. I'm optimistic about the way things are going to turn out in Wisconsin for the non-Trump forces. You don't even have to be pro-Cruz. You just have to be fuck Trump. It's looking very good.
On that same note, given that we've got so much time between primaries, Ben Domich in the transom today was talking about how Trump has seen a significant slowdown. The momentum is done. Because of the fact that we've had so much time between races, Donald Trump hasn't had a major decisive win. He's had this string of bad weeks with bad press, things like that, and it's starting to take its toll. We have a Wisconsin primary, then we've got 2 more weeks until the next one. Just how much damage can taking that momentum away from Donald Trump actually do? And this question I want to send over to Bill.
I was not listening to the question. I was arguing with Just Carl over Twitter. Just Carl is the man. and took issue with my defense of not my defense of Trump. Just Carl, I was just tweeting this to you. I'll just say it to you. No one opposes Trump as much as I do. I take issue and I'm angry about the piddling, ineffectual counter arguments that we are making against him.
Okay,
And
Bill, I'm going to help
my
you.
main issue. Never confuse my critique of the people attacking Trump with an endorsement of Trump. If you watch the show, you know I despise this man. I don't think he's pro-life at all, and I don't believe anything he says. So
I'm gonna help you out.
Here you go. You answer the question, Joy.
No, I'm not going to answer it. I'm going to repeat the question that Joe asked you so that you can answer it.
All right,
you say that given the fact that Trump's momentum seems to have been halted significantly by the fact that there aren't a lot of primaries right now, and that he's about to lose the next one that comes up, and it's going to be another 2 weeks, after that. Do you think that Trump is a creation of, a media created, a momentum created creature, that the fact that he's got this long dry spell in the wilderness is going to be what stops him?
Well, what's going to stop him once he loses Wisconsin is the fact that the map doesn't look good for him outside of New York. Yeah, I mean, we are going to go into an open convention, as my establishment peers are calling it now. It's totally a broker convention, and that's all right. I love choosing nominees in smoke-filled back rooms. But to do it, in pretty much a pride parade setting that is a political convention can be just as fun. So I don't think he has a path to 1237. That being said, I do think there will be fallout from this. And you know what? If we're going to have a broker convention, we're going to have to try to do something to actually, pick someone that doesn't lose us all of the Trump voters who have turned out. Now, who that nominee will be, I have no idea. Answering the question about media creation, I would love to blame the media for this, for all of the free advertising money they gave him. But he really did tap into something completely unexpected. If you read, the testimony of the super PAC hanger-on who turned against Trump this week, you saw that he didn't actually think that he would catch fire over the summer. He wasn't serious about winning. Suddenly people responded to it, and that is something that's not the media's fault. It's our fault. And sadly, the thing about it is that it could have been totally avoided because this was the most talented field of candidates I've seen in my lifetime, which is, of course, relatively short. But still, it was the worst possible time for Donald Trump to come in. So, of course, he had to come in and ruin everything for us because the devil is real.
Well, speaking of a convention, brokered or not, we have this. Hugh Hewitt posted this earlier, and I thought it was absolutely hilarious and possibly the most Karl Rove thing ever said, where Karl Rove basically told Hugh Hewitt on his show that it might be best for the GOP to nominate a candidate who isn't currently running. And that, of course, being quintessential Karl Rove in thinking that there is still a chance for Karl Rove and Karl Rove's friends to have an impact on this, really shows that the meltdown in 2012 affected him a lot more than we thought, that he doesn't think, or that he thinks this might actually be a good idea. Either that, or he's trying to rally anti-establishment people around Cruz, and he knows that if he can just be the most Karl Rove person Karl Rove can be, then he just might have a chance to stop Trump. I'm going to turn this one over to Neal. Neal, what are your thoughts on what Karl Rove said about the GOP nominating somebody who isn't currently running?
I mean, I'm okay with that. I don't have any particular problem with a convention deciding to nominate someone who isn't currently running. There are several really qualified candidates who would be a lot better than Ted Cruz or Donald Trump or John Kasich, who for one reason or another were unable to gain traction in the race, had to drop out, ran out of money, what have you. So, yeah, I would be completely open to someone coming in as in the nomination fight on the convention floor, and that would work out fine for me. I mean, think of, say, Rick Perry maybe getting in there, hopefully not taking any drugs before he gives a speech. Think of Marco Rubio making another run. He could probably seem a lot better by comparison after the last couple weeks. You know, there's a ton of folks out there. Hell, Carly Fiorina, get her back in there. She's sharp. I mean, I know a lot of people have a problem with her, but she would be just a breath of fresh air at this point. So, yeah, I'm totally open to it. You know, I don't know if what Karl Rove's deal is, but he doesn't seem to bother me.
Now, speaking of the potential for, say, Marco Rubio or Rick Perry, we did have a pair of stories coming out. Just real quick, Rick Perry. Okay, I thought that was like some sort of Twitch that Bill had where every time you mentioned Rick Perry's name, he put a thumbs up. Anyway, you know, we have this story that came out. There's no record of Rick Perry having voted in the primary, which leaves him free to run as a third-party candidate in Texas, according to whatever story said this, and I was barely paying attention at the time because I've been on cold meds for 3 days. And there's also, you know, the stories that are coming out about how Marco Rubio is not releasing his delegates at this time, and all of this, you know, leads to speculation that either one of these two men is going to come in and try to play spoiler for Cruz, Trump, or God help me, I tried to go all night without saying his name, John Kasich, who by the way is ineligible to be president solely on the fact that he uses fork with he eats pizza with a fork, which we'll get to in a little bit.
So does Trump. They both do it. Fuck 'em.
Okay, so Trump, de Blasio, and Kasich all use a fork, because I specifically remember writing a story about de Blasio doing it, which just means that the three are as liberal as it gets and are not good for the GOP. But anyway, we're looking at the potential for somebody like Rick Perry or Marco Rubio to play spoiler at the convention. Do you think this is what Karl Rove has in mind, Jeff?
Now I got caught out the same way Bill did. God damn it.
Do you think that a Rick Perry or Marco Rubio spoiler for the conventions?
Yeah.
Do you think that's exactly what Rove has in mind, or do you think he's really hoping for like Mitt Romney to say, "Oh, I'll take it from here"?
Joy, Joe's real question to you was, do you know how to pronounce de Blasio?
It's de Blasio. It's not de Blasio. It's Bill de Blasio, but it doesn't matter. Anyways, the question is, yeah, I actually, listen, I find it very hard to separate out my fondness, my lingering fondness for Marco Rubio from the idea of him walking in as a white knight at the convention. I also have to say that I start from the baseline assumption that November is a lost cause. I think that the divisions within the party are so great that it would be impossible for us to sufficiently unify in time to hold on to the to win the election in November. That's a much longer project. But I do think it would be foolish, be huge folly for us to take someone like Mitt Romney and make him our nominee, not only because it would disillusion any number of angry conservatives who are sick of the base and aren't really fond of Romney the way someone like I am, someone like me is, but also because, like, hey, he had his chance. Paul Ryan is another one that people mention as, like, an obvious candidate as a white knight. I don't know. I tend to think that absent some sort of exogenous event that we can't predict, that Ted Cruz is probably going to be the most likely choice to win a brokered convention, simply because he will have a moral claim upon it that nobody else is going to have. Not Kasich, not anyone. Doesn't matter whether you like him or not. It's just going to be far less of a hassle to give it to him and say, okay, fine, go lose nobly and in a way that doesn't embarrass the party or set us back in the Senate and the House so much than it is to find some sort of perfect candidate who can beat Hillary. But then again, that calculation for me is largely born out of the fact that I think that it's already lost cause at this point, that Trump has riven the party in half so much that we don't really have a chance of winning in November, absent, of course, those factors that you can't predict, an indictment, a massive crash, economic crash, or a terrorist event.
In that same vein, of course, we have to remember that Paul Ryan, according to certain groups, is actually Muslim sleeper, and you could tell when he allowed that beard to grow a couple months back. That was actually what spread around by some very not prominent, but very loudly anti-establishment folks. And so for those of you, I see that Neal self-consciously strokes his beard there as I say that. But Paul Ryan, seen just as much an establishment guy as anybody else. It's currently in Washington D.C. Any of that, anybody trying to bring them in could cause a whole lot of havoc, and which is why I lean in Jeff's direction. That I think it's just safer for the establishment, which is the word that, as we've mentioned, has totally lost all meaning at this point. The establishment should just come to terms with Ted Cruz.
No.
Thank you, Neal. Anyway, the establishment.
Stop saying it. I'm not going to do it. We don't have to settle. We don't have to settle for Count Chocula, okay?
Neal, you sound like a 40-year-old woman talking to another, 38-year-old woman about why she doesn't need to get married. Oh, there's no biological clock ticking. Don't worry about it. Don't settle. It's going to come around.
And
you're wrong. Marry the fat guy with a good paycheck and a sunny disposition.
You're better than this. You're better than this.
Thank you, Bill. That was truly a phenomenal metaphor, and that's made me lose exactly where I was. So instead, I'm going to jump to the next subject here, which is going to be what's the proper way to eat pizza? Is it with a fork? Do you just lay the slice out flat, or do you fold the slice so you can cram more of it into your mouth? I'm going to start with Bill.
All right, so the proper way to eat pizza is with no hands at all. You just kind of jab your head down into it. The proper way to eat Chicago pizza is with a fork and knife. Yeah.
The proper way to eat Chicago pizza.
Donald Trump doesn't eats pizza with a fork and knife. He claims I forget what his excuse was, because all I could think was that his hands weren't big enough to grasp a slice of pizza. Kasich wisely corrected himself. Started the first bite off on a piece of pizza, but it was a veggie-looking pizza, so he's disqualified right away. A proper way to eat pizza is just to stuff as many copious amounts of pizza into your mouth as possible. Shotgun it, if you will.
All right, Jeff, you're up.
The proper way to eat Chicago pizza is to not eat it, and I say that as a man who lives in Chicago. The proper way to eat New York-style pizza is to fold it. I'm definitely a fan of the folding, but you got to make sure you have some napkins underneath, because I guarantee you some of that grease is going to come dripping out. It's going to get all over your shirt or your pants unless you're careful. The proper way to eat a Totino's party pizza is to just pick it up and put it all into your mouth. The way Bill
you take the whole circular Totino's pizza and you fold it and you just eat it like a very, very large, meaty, saucy taco.
Yeah, like a big calzone, basically.
Yeah, basically.
Yes, exactly.
All right, Neal. Similar but not the same question for you. Is Pizza Hut actually pizza?
My wife would tell you no, it is not. And it's not really good pizza, but I enjoy it. I like Pizza Hut. I've always enjoyed the saturated grease of the crust. It's just kind of like you bite into it and the grease spreads out over your mouth, I like that in a pizza. But Pizza Hut is more of a biscuit of sorts, like a griddle cake almost. I don't know exactly how to describe it. It's not my favorite type of pizza, and it's not New York style pizza, which is the true pizza.
All right, Jeff, you're a Chicago resident. Of the fast food pizzas, which is the largest affront to God?
Oh, it's clearly got to be Domino's. I mean, now we have our own kind of Domino's in Chicago called Sarpino's, which is really it's
Love
cheap.
Sarpino's.
Exactly. I was about to say.
It's the best cheap chain pizza in the country.
Cheap chain pizza, and it's open at like 3 a.m. in the morning too, when your wife is out of town, and you have to secretly get something that she won't find about. My wife is now actually laughing in the other room, and I was hoping she was.
You cheat on your wife with Sarpino's? Good call. Good call. That's the only time I'm fine with unfaithfulness.
Well, I mean, okay, if you really are a connoisseur of Chicago brands, there are two other really famous ones. Giordano's is sort of a big deep dish thing. I don't like dear Chicago style. I'm not a fan of that. But Lou Malnati's, where I've actually met Bill for dinner, in fact, one time with his wife and his kids. I really love Lou Malnati's, so that's the real good kind of big Chicago chain.
Yeah, it was my wife, my kids, Jeff, and his loneliness, and we all got together. And
no, my unbearable sadness.
Forks and knives.
I carry around with me like a weight. Yes, that's right.
So you carry your sadness around like the anti-depression commercial that I can even remember the name of the drug for now, but one where they talk about their depression. It's a cute little drawing that follows them around everywhere.
Oh, right. Actually, my life is basically like one of those, sort of, gray-toned, dimly lit, ads with a guy or maybe a middle-aged woman sitting in a room with no light, looking out a window into a gray sky. That's basically the way I carry my sadness with me. And you've nailed it, Joe.
I'm thinking that probably the world's greatest film noir at this point would be Jeff and Neal together in a film noir, but that's also a sitcom. Just because I would want to see that as something that you guys are involved with.
It would be The Odd Couple meets Blade Runner.
I was going to say more like the Odd Couple.
I think Neal would definitely be Felix, and I would definitely be Oscar. I think that seems to be right here. He's very much about the grooming. I think it makes sense.
Going back to more serious topics, according to the Google chat that we have going on here on the side, Bill says we have about 20 more minutes based on how much beer he has left. So I'm going to take this moment to redirect the conversation to something a little more important, and that is, where do we go? Where do we go after this presidential election is over? What happens? Because we're seeing conservative media who are either gaining a bunch of popularity because they support Donald Trump or are gaining a bunch of popularity because they oppose Donald Trump. What happens when Donald Trump is no longer in the picture? What happens when, the first Wednesday of November? What happens when, or the day after the election in November? What happens, is anybody going to be punished for their stance? Are the anti-Trump people going to look at President Trump or a losing candidate Trump and say this was all their fault? Is the anti-Trump media going to look at the pro-Trump media and say this is clearly their fault? And what happens from here? I mean, Bill, you serve. Oh, wait, no, he's not even paying attention. Bill is talking to the spirits, and I don't mean liquor this time. So instead, let's go over to Jeff. Jeff, what happens the day after the election when Donald Trump is no longer a factor in my life because I'll have committed ritual suicide?
Well, you'll be dead, so it won't really matter. I guess that's the end of the question.
Neal gets control of the show.
Yeah, well, that would actually, probably also be for the better, to be perfectly blunt. Maybe we in that case we could finally get Leon to come back on as a guest after you fired him. Okay, no. First of all, I think that it's sadly farcical. First of all, assuming that Trump wins the nomination, which I don't think he will at this point. Let's say he does. He goes on to lose ignominiously. He's not simply going to disappear. This is what he wants. He's not going to have any more TV gigs after that point. He's not going to be doing The Apprentice or anything like that. He's out. He's burned those bridges. He's said too many things, especially after he gets creamed by the inchoate rage of every minority and woman in the United States. He's not going to be able to go back on to, say, NBC. So what is he going to do? He's going to use this shit-stirring power that he now apparently has, and he's going to basically try to be the next Sarah Palin. Although I fear that he'd do a better job than Sarah Palin ever did, because Donald Trump is, if nothing else, a very canny manipulator and a great showman, and not the same kind of sort of bumbling rube with a rube family. God, I feel bad if I'm insulting some people who are Palin fans, which is precisely why I fear so much him winning the nomination. I mean, yes, he won't ever take office, so we won't nuke Denmark, but the damage he can do to the Republican Party and the conservative movement just by being the Mitt Romney, the way Mitt Romney had a senior statesman role. Well, I mean, holy crap, imagine Donald Trump having that role after losing in 2016. No, it's not enough to have him get the nomination and lose. We got to deny that guy the nomination and save ourselves, because as a guy, by the way, my one last thing, I'll stay and then I'll stop, is that I've always had this pet theory, and a lot of people, it's now become sort of a trendy thing to suggest, is that Donald Trump really is maybe even just sort of doesn't want the nomination. He's been sort of trying to throw the game. He clearly doesn't seem to care that much. What he wants to do is be able to say, well, I could have been great, but I had it stolen from me. I could have done the job, but the establishment screwed me over. So I think his actual ideal scenario is where he gets it taken away from him at the convention, and so he can spend the rest of his life saying, I could have been a contender. I think he would be mortified, scared shitless if he actually won it. It would be like the last scene in The Candidate, where Robert Redford turns to his advisors after winning an upset race, and he says, what the hell are we supposed to do now? Because he never expected to find himself in that position. But
that theory is actually very similar. I urge a lot of folks, I know that it's a site that usually leans to the left on cultural issues, but go check out crack.com, where Dan O'Brien wrote a fantastic piece on his time as Donald Trump's campaign advisor. It is a hilarious piece, and it shows just how much Donald Trump didn't want it. It is, of course, satire, but it is one of the best things written about the Trump campaign so far. Neal, I want to ask you this. At the same time, if you were a Democrat by some, terrible, terrible scenario, and you look at what's going on, say, in Washington, D.C., where the D.C. Democrats have decided that, oops, we didn't get Bernie Sanders' name onto the ballot in time, despite the fact that he paid his fees. And you look and Hillary Clinton gets the nomination. How would you as a Democrat feel knowing that there is a Democrat establishment and they just screwed one of your guys out of a nomination?
Well, I mean, if I were a Democrat, I'd be totally on board with Hillary Clinton. Because I'm not a big fan of insurgencies in any form. I like to crush those. I think that it's important to maintain order and a hierarchical establishment. So I would definitely be on Hillary's side. Now, as a conservative, I am really happy Bernie's doing as well as he is. I want him to keep going. I think he can, take this all the way. But yeah, if I were a Democrat who was inclined to support Bernie Sanders, I would probably feel a little bit like this is rigged. It's a bit of a coronation for Hillary. She's the dream deferred because they went with the black guy in 2008 instead of the first woman. So now it's her turn, and this old white guy from Brooklyn is not going to stand in her way. He's not going to mount a serious challenge. It's foreordained that she will be the nominee. I happen to think she's also going to be the president because we have totally screwed it up on our side and thrown this one. I'm not nearly so optimistic as Jeff. I think that there are far more stupid people out there voting on both sides of the political divide than he wants to believe, and that they will make the worst possible choice for the Republic in either case.
You know what I'm interested in, not to hijack hosting duties, but this week, very important, a legitimate, very good argument was rejected by the Supreme Court because it deadlocked. And that was, of course, Friedrichs v. California Teachers Association, where a veteran school teacher challenged forced unionism for public sector employees as compelled political speech, because any collective bargaining that you do for taxpayer dollars is inherently a display of budgetary priorities, which is a political position. I thought it was a very good argument. They lost because the Supreme Court deadlocked 4-4. Tie goes to the runner. In this case, they went back to the lower court decision. Of course, the lower court could not overturn long-standing Supreme Court precedent. Only the Supreme Court could. What the hell are we going to do if we have a Bush v. Gore situation in this election? You know, don't even think about the players.
Don't worry, we won't.
No. Of course we won't. But that would be one of the most ridiculous. Like, imagine if it's Trump Sanders, you know, this, or I don't know, Cruz Clinton. It could be close theoretically. What do you do in that sort of thing when there's only 8 members of the Supreme Court? Anyone have any ideas?
Mad Max on I-95.
Yeah, I'm actually down for that.
I mean, seriously, if it's
495, destroy the Beltway.
If it comes down to
not a real road.
If it were to come down to Trump v. Sanders, I mean, that's where we're headed, one way or the other. Nuclear wasteland, guys.
You know, I've long held the argument that Trump versus Sanders as the general election is exactly what the United States of America deserves. I believe that we are past due for our own little political apocalypse, and I think that would be the perfect way to allow it to happen. Why not take a guy, if he's not a white nationalist, a guy heavily supported by white nationalists, and pit him against a very open socialist for control of our country? Where could that? Why wouldn't we, as people who have watched our political process become so corrupted, why wouldn't we want that at this point? Neal?
I mean, hey, worth a shot, right? I mean, we won't know how it's going to go until we try it. maybe it'll be good, maybe it will not be good, but no. Yeah, that's a pretty bleak perspective, Joe.
I learned it from you.
This is sad. It's like that commercial from the '80s. I learned it from watching you. I'm ashamed. I'm ashamed of myself now. No, I happen to think that perhaps there's a little bit of a conflict, that it might not be the worst idea to just get it over with, rip the Band-Aid off, and expose all the lingering resentments and fault lines in our society and in our political system, and resort to just absolutely, open political opposition. We've had a good run for 200 odd years, and with a short interlude in the 1860s, but I mean, it just might be time for stuff to happen like that.
On a slightly related note, I do want to ask, and now I've completely lost the question, and I'm going to blame Bill for that, because that is just the kind of thing that Bill would do, is make me forget this question. If we're looking at the entire political process blowing up, and I'm not saying that we're going to get a Trump versus Sanders election. I don't think it's possible at this point. Again, you look to the shenanigans currently going on in Washington, D.C., with how they're, conveniently leaving Bernie Sanders off the ballot there. We look at the political process that we've come to know and love, and we've seen it entirely corrupted for personal gain. We've seen it become entirely corrupt. I mean, it's not new. This whole election cycle isn't new, but it is certainly a lot more out in the open than perhaps in the past. And we're watching our political process blow up. We're watching what we, as the four of us, have obsessed over for at least a few years now. We're watching all of that go straight to hell. And my question is, will Bill McMorris survive? And to answer that question, I'm going to go to Jeff.
Hopefully not. That's all I can say. I mean, it's the kind of thing I need to pray on. I need to contemplate, but dear God, if you are listening and you find me to be, your humble servant, let's end Bill now while we can, before it's too late.
Bill, what are your thoughts?
I heard my name mentioned, so I think I should be able to respond.
You're
treating me very unfairly right now, Joe, and I don't appreciate it.
Boycott debate then, Bill. Are you going to be able to survive what 2016 does to not just you, but to our political process?
Hey, check it out. It's Josh.
Hey. Cheers.
We've lost Bill, so I'm going to mute Bill, and instead I'm going to go over to Neal. Neal, save us from whatever the hell Bill just did.
What? No, you were me and my roommates, which is important.
It is important. So close to
Neal, just go.
All right.
Well, I've lost the conversation here. We were talking about whether Bill will physically survive.
Whether Bill will physically survive 2016, because it's looking pretty rough right now.
Yes, I think he will.
I think fantastic.
We won't get that much further.
Look at this healthy complexion. I know. The real question is, will you guys raise money to take care of my kids? We got another one on the way in July.
Bill,
really?
Just better become a fundraising.
Bill, I promise you I will start a GoFundMe for your kids, and then I will take every single dime of it for myself. That's my promise to you. That's right. I'd be like a regular Chuck Johnson style GoFundMe.
Don't set up a GoFundMe. Set up a scam pack. Be like, donate $5 now, to elect Donald Trump, and just get me like $800 million, and then, asterisks.
I mean, nobody's ever held accountable for those, so yeah, it just all goes to overhead.
Exactly.
So yeah.
Lachlan Marquet nailed that this week about a scam Trump pack. It was great. Check the Free Beacon for anti-Trump coverage, everybody.
Nice.
Hey, by the way, now if I want to step out of.
Hey, don't interrupt, Neal.
Oh, well, then I take it back. I'll shut up.
Well, no, I was to wrap up the question of whether Bill McMorris will live through the next few years. I think so.
I'm not sure he's living through tonight.
No, this is normal. He'll be fine. He'll be fine.
Eventually, he's not going to be fine. I'm really worried. The next week's episode is going to be an intervention for Bill.
Bill, you're ruining your life. Remember that time when you came on to Splinter Caucus and you couldn't even string a sentence together? You gotta help yourself.
Yeah, and I still made more sense than half of the average Trump people.
God damn it. Hey, listen, I actually want to turn things around here and take the reins for just a second from Joe and ask a question of each and every one of you, which is, how many interns do you guys have writing your tweets and articles for one another? Like, Joe, you must have 44 separate interns that handling your Twitter account and your RedState work, yes?
I'm a teacher. I can't even afford myself.
Well, no, I mean, that's what those kids are doing all day, I assume, right? I mean, I've seen you writing on RedState. I assume it comes from 12-year-olds.
No, that's legit me. I never, my emotional age is that of the students I teach, which ranges from 12 to 14. Anybody who's met me knows that. This isn't new. My students, do you have any idea just how badly 12 to 14-year-olds write? I think we joke about it a lot, and I'm not defending myself here. I'm telling you legitimately, they're awful.
I was a better writer at 12 than I am now, but I'm very strange.
But do you understand complex sentences?
No, not anymore, but once I did.
Okay, well, see, they're never going to.
That's because you're their teacher. That's the reason.
That's a very good point, but if you give a handful of 12 to 14-year-olds a writing assignment, you say you must have 5 paragraphs, and each paragraph must be 5 sentences, you are guaranteed to have at least your last 2 sentences in that essay are going to be, "That's what I think, the end." Guaranteed. From 30 to 40% of those kids.
Well, okay, but Neal, clearly, you must use a ghostwriter, because your normal tweets and your work for the Federalists and other places, it just doesn't even come close to capturing the real anger and rage that courses through your body when you talk with us.
Yeah, I do have editors, and they remove like all the real nasty curses that I research and try to lay on people in the course of my writing. But the tweets, that's all me, baby. I don't have any help with those tweets. Like I got limericks. I'm the one to blame for those.
So but, your limericks are not in fact the creation of a committee composed of 4chan interns.
No, they're not. I mean, I don't have a single racist writing articles for me. It's
you're behind the times. I'm very disappointed in you.
I know.
Do you want to explain to those who may not have checked Twitter in the past 20 minutes what it is we're referring to here?
Well,
because you were talking about him earlier today. That's why.
I was actually kind of ragging on this particular person earlier in the day on Twitter. It turns out that noted alt-right homosexual Milo Yiannopoulos does not write his own articles. He primarily uses a team of interns to carry out his crusade to legitimize white nationalism and the candidacy of Donald Trump. So that's interesting to know. I will say one thing about, does he go by Milo or Milo? I feel like
Milo.
It's Milo. Is it Milo?
Nero.
Well, no, that's his handle.
Guys,
is Nero.
Guys, the proper way to refer to him is Daddy, and he ghostwrites my tweets.
Does he really?
Well, I mean, that actually, I figured that one out.
He does good work. Look, he does. He's a clever guy. He's got a decent sense of humor, and he's got a real talent for drawing attention to himself. But he has put his talents into the service of deplorable ideology, in which he has no real investment because he's not an American citizen. He's just over here dicking around. He literally has nothing to gain or lose by.
So he's the liberal caricature of the CIA. He's just like to rig an election.
that's what he's doing.
It's pretty bold. I don't know.
It's crazy.
Who still bleaches their hair? Like, what grown man? Like, I know frosted tips were big in the late 90s, but like this man bleaches his hair, and it's.
I gotta say, I don't understand the choice.
Yeah, this is 2016, guy, but this is 2016. Everybody, stop bleaching your hair.
This is the year of our Lord, 2016, which, no, bleach should not go anywhere near hair at all at this point. I think we need to stop this as a movement. I think it starts with Bill writing a very, very long piece for the Free Beacon, probably. Having Yiannopoulos write it for him.
Yeah,
because he's going to have interns covering his own Breitbart stuff.
Yeah. If you want to put bleach in your hair, it's better off in your mouth. That's the McMorris line.
Just drink the bleach.
Ladies and gentlemen, this has been another episode of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Friends. This has been Joe Cunningham of RedState, Neal Dewing of the Fifth Estate podcast, which we'll be debuting at some point in the near future, Jeff Blehar of the Decision Desk, and Bill McMorris of an alcohol rehab center coming near you. Been a pleasure to have you guys with us, and tune in next week as I try to actually plan out a show and then stick with that plan sometime through as we go through the entire day. Thank you very much, and God bless, and stop Trump.